What are the 5 hardest digital SAT questions in 2024? For context, my name is Will, and I scored perfectly on the digital SAT in this video here. In this video, I'm going to be going through what I think are the 5 hardest types of questions on the digital SAT, and I'm going to be going through how to solve these problems and why so many people end up getting them wrong. And I'm going to end the video with what I think is the single most deceptive type of question on the digital SAT and how to avoid being tricked by it. To start off, we have this question right here. This question is in the English section, and it's asking which of the following words completes the blank according to the conventions of standard English. In particular, it's talking about the shape of a traditional violin, flattening some of the instrument's curves, and making blank lighter overall. Now, pretty quickly, we can tell that A and B are not the right answer here, as you can pretty much just say these out loud, inserting those and one into the sentence, and recognizing that it doesn't sound right, it doesn't make any sense, and it's definitely not correct. However, what's tricky is knowing whether or not it's them or it that should go in the blank. Many test takers would think that them would go in this blank. Since they see the instrument's curves, they think that the object that the sentence is talking about is a plural. In other words, they think that the sentence is talking about the curves being lighter overall. But that is the trick, and the way to realize this trick is recognizing that the words lighter overall are at the end of the sentence. And let's think, does it make sense to make curves lighter overall? Maybe, but that's not what the sentence is talking about. If you read closely, you'll see that it's talking about the shape of a traditional violin, and it also goes on to say how it flattens some of the instrument's curves, making it lighter overall. In other words, the trick of this question is recognizing that the sentence is talking about the violin, and the violin is what's being made lighter overall. The main takeaway from this question is you have to read every word in these English questions in order to get the question correct, because it'll give you 2 options, one of which sounds like it could be right, but ultimately it's wrong, and the true right answer is revealed by every word around the blank. The next tricky type of question on the digital SAT is a new type of question that has to do with bullet points. Basically, in this question here, we're given a bunch of random bullet points about a scenario, and then we're asked to emphasize a difference in the origins of the 2 words. And so we have a bunch of information here on the left, but what we really want to focus on is finding the choice that best answers the question, difference in the origins of the 2 words. Now, pretty quickly, we can see that B and C do not do this because they either only answer one component of the question or they don't really answer the question at all. So once again, we're left with 2 options that seem like they both could be correct, but one is only the true answer. D seems like it could be correct because it talks about the diverse linguistic origins and it actually mentions the words themselves, but D is not the right answer because it's missing that final step, emphasizing the difference in the origins. D doesn't necessarily emphasize this difference, it's just saying they have diverse linguistic origins, but doesn't emphasize the difference between the 2 words here. A, on the other hand, gives an actual explanation for the differences of the origins in the 2 words, saying one is from Anglo-French origin and the other is from ancient Greek. So A is the best answer. And so the takeaway from this particular question is to ask, what is the question asking specifically? Again, you have to pay attention to detail and you have to read every word so that when you get down to 2 that seem like they both could be right, you pick the actual right one. The third question that we're going to take a look at has to do with very simple math, where it's the total number of points awarded to a student based on red tokens and green tokens. And then it asks something pretty weird. How many more points is a red token worth than a green token? So what we have here is just 2 variables, some numbers, an equation, and we have to figure out how much more a token is worth than the other. This seems kind of difficult at first. How do we go about this? But what we can figure out, if we look closely, is that we have the answer right in front of us. If you think about what the equation is saying, you're saying that for every red token, you get 45 points. If we get 0 red tokens, we get 0 points from that component. If we get 1 red token, we get 45. And if we get 2 red tokens, now we get 90, and so on. And so a red token on its own is worth 45. A green token, on the other hand, is worth 5 by the same logic. And so ultimately, the answer to this question is just the difference between the 2, 45 minus 5. Ultimately, the takeaway for questions like this is to ask yourself, what do these numbers mean? In these tricky word problems, sometimes just stopping and thinking about what the numbers that you're given actually mean in context gives you the answer right there, and it's very simple. Moving on to the 4th type of problem, we have what I like to call the crazy variables problems. Basically, these are math questions where you're given a bunch of variables just beyond x or y. For example, here we have c, which is some constant added onto the x and y. We have y equals negative 2x squared plus 9x, and then we have 2y equals c, and we need to find for what value of c do these 2 equations intersect at one point. Now, this might seem daunting to do at first if you don't know the underlying math at play. But the strategy to use to approach a problem like this is to utilize the tools that are given to you, in particular, the calculator. Here, what we can do with the calculator is actually graph the first equation to get a sense of what it looks like on the graph. And then we can substitute a value in for c to see what that looks like. So here we have 2y equals 16, and we see that this intersects at 2 points. And then so slowly and slowly, we can change that value of c on the calculator to find the point where it intersects at exactly 1 point with the parabola. Here we see that the equation 2y equals 20.25 intersects the original parabola at exactly 1 point according to our calculator. And so we can simply state that the answer is c equals 20.25. So the takeaway from this type of question is to utilize the tools provided to you, and that attempting something or putting something down is better than abandoning the question entirely, because you might end up getting it right and it might end up being easier than you thought. Now, finally, what I think the hardest, trickiest, and most deceiving type of question on the digital SAT has to do with the comma or no comma questions. Here's what I mean. In this example here, we're trying to fill in the blank with the correct form of the word gingerbread, followed by either a dash, a comma, nothing, or a colon. And pretty clearly here, we can see that if we just read the sentence aloud, as usual, two options are immediately eliminated, the colon and the dash. It wouldn't make sense to use either of those here. But how do we know whether or not to put a comma in here? It's a little bit hard to tell based on what is just here alone and trying to read, while her 2019 novel, Gingerbread, comma or not, offers a delicious twist on the classic tale Hansel and Gretel. It's not necessarily super clear which one to do. And many test takers here would assume that we need a comma because boy, snow, bird, for instance, has a bunch of commas, and so we should then put another comma, right? But here is the trick. They're trying to get you to focus here on the question. They're trying to get you to focus on boy, snow, bird, and just assume that that comma should be carried over to the next question. But what if we could just isolate this last part of the sentence and say, while her 2019 novel Gingerbread offers a delicious twist on the classic tale? We can see that when we isolate it and completely ignore the boy, snow, bird component, we see that the answer is revealed. We don't actually need a comma here at all. As a matter of fact, a comma makes it more jumbled. And so the correct answer is C, just gingerbread. And so the main takeaway from this one is to focus on what's near the word in question in these English passages where it seems a bit unclear, and don't get distracted by unnecessary parts of the question. Additionally, it's important to find the trick before it tricks you so that you can be certain of the right answer and not fall into the trap. All right, that's the end of the 5 hardest digital SAT questions. Thank you for watching, and good luck with all of your test preparation in the future.